This is part one of a two-part deep dive into one of Gordon Lightfoot's songs. The second part of this episode will be released at a later date. I hope you enjoy the conversation between me and my guest. Thank you in advance for listening.
The first guest of the evening is truly a poet. He's an artist. He is a friend and an inspiration to anyone who has ever played the guitar or tried to write poetry. Would you please welcome Gordon Lightfoot?
Go first in the world, go forth with your fears. Remember, a price must be paid. Be always too soon, be never too fast, at the time when all bets must be laid. Beware of the darkness, be kind to your children. Remember the woman who waits. And the house you live in will never fall down if you pity the stranger who stands at your gate. This is Carefree Highway Revisited, the show that celebrates the work of Gordon Lightfoot song by song, with all episodes free at www.lightfootpodcast.com. I'm your host, Mike Messner, and along with me today is a buddy of mine who's making his second appearance on the show from San Jose, California, Martin Brandt. Martin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be with you again, Michael.
Now, you were with us during our first season back in 2021, talking about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
I got the pick of the litter then.
Yeah, you did. And that, I guess, the early bird gets the worm or gets the song, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can't expect you to encapsulate 4.5 years in a few seconds, but are there any highlights in the life of Martin Brandt that you want to mention?
I guess I can just quote Joe Walsh. Life's been good. Life's been good to me so far. I can't complain, but sometimes I still do.
Well, yeah, if you're going to quote the Bard of Wichita, Kansas, I guess that must be a pretty good statement on that. Good. Full disclosure is that Martin's sister Laura is my bandmate in a local group that we have called the Bay Shores. And
you really should refer to as the great Laura Brandt.
I should, but I'm not going to. So coming to a theater or a living room near you if you live on the West Coast. So today we're going to be talking about the song The House That You Live In. And I'm wondering why you wanted to talk about it, why you like it.
You know, the Summertime Dream by Gordon Lightfoot, the album that contains the song The House You Live In, was the first LP I ever bought with my own money. Gemco was the name of the department store.
Sure.
And I was a big fan of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And so I guess I was 12 years old, maybe 13. And I'd had the single of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But remember how 45s sometimes had parts cut out to accommodate the smaller format.
Of course.
You know, I felt like this isn't good enough. I have to have the whole album. I want the album version of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And so I went out and with whatever money I had, I remember, I think albums at the time were maybe $4.99. And
those were the days.
Those were the days. $4.99 to 12-year-old Marty Brandt was considerable expense. So I was rolling the dice a bit with this, you know, will I like the rest of the album was the question. So I went home and put it on, and The House You Live In was one of the songs that really stood out. One of the songs that was not titled The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The song had, to me, even then, a real kind of biblical vibe. And I think it comes from the word house, which in the King James version of the Bible appears as a term for one's household, one's home. You know, there's that wonderful play, Inherit the Wind, which quotes from the book of Proverbs and saying, he who troubleth his own house shall inherit the wind. And in the play, it's referring to a number of different characters who show an inability to love the enemies that they've gone out of their way to make. And a couple of them are ruined by it. And so it's a really beautiful use of that particular Bible verse. And so to me, with terms like that, another thing is I recall is I will dwell in the house of the Lord being another common verse, or a verse that I'd heard repeatedly, perhaps at Mass or something. And, you know, just the other day, I went and saw the 10 Commandments at the Stanford Theater, all 3 hours and 38 minutes of it, or whatever it was.
So this is the original one, the Charlton Heston.
Yeah. And it's not too bad without the ads cutting it up. You know, I've never even made it to the end of that until this time, because I saw it in the theater. But, you know, I remember there's a couple points in the movie where Moses says things like, I will dwell in this house, you know, things like that. But again, I'm just trying to trace this biblical evocation of that word house for me. And growing up in a sort of what I would call a hyperbaric Catholic atmosphere, altar boy, all that stuff, these things carried real weight with me. So when I first heard this song, which it has this tone, rather paternal, and one might say paternalistic, depending on your point of view, but tone of advice, of wisdom. And then coupled with that idea of the house you live in will never fall down if you pity the stranger that stands at your gate. It carried a lot of weight for me.
You said it much more eloquently than I could have. And I like the fact that you examined it like a good English teacher,
Yeah, I never had a chance.
Yeah, no.
Even back then, right?
Yeah, exactly. This comes from somebody who was raised by an English teacher. So I have every idea what it is you're talking about.
Yeah.
For me, there really is a paternalistic attitude, and I mean that in the best sense of the word. To me, it's meaningful because I have a son, my only kid, who is about to graduate high school. And he's going to be, in matter of fact, this coming weekend, he and I are headed up to Tacoma, Washington, so that he can do his freshman orientation at the University of Puget Sound. As I'm seeing that my son is going to no longer be a resident in my house, that he is becoming an adult and is going off on his own to some degree or another. Obviously, the work of a parent is never finished, but it is like if this was my pep talk in the locker room before he went out onto the field, this is what I would tell him. Is exactly how Gordon has written the song. So that to me is the reason why it resonated so hard. Of course, you said that you heard it when you were very young, and I'm hearing it for the first time in my 50s. And it is deeply profound in a way that I think only a parent can understand. Now, is this a song that you could listen to absolutely anytime, or is there a perfect setting where you think, okay, everything's right, all the elements are there, and I'm going to turn this on and listen to it?
No, this is one of those songs I could listen to any old time. And I know we'll get more deeply into some of the particulars about it as we go on. But yeah, I don't need a particular set of circumstances to enjoy this song.
Neither do I. Usually with Gordon's music, they conjure up a certain setting or a certain circumstance or a time of day or a place or something like that.
True.
But this is one that, for me, I could listen to absolutely anytime. And we'll probably listen to a lot in the next few months until it gets to the point where I was like, no, I got to turn this off. It's just going to evoke
don't beat yourself up with it. Make sure it's making you feel good.
Exactly. Because I don't think Gordon would have wanted us to use it for self-flagellation.
Right.
In fact, I'm quite sure that he wouldn't have. Now, I looked in the Nicholas Jennings book, and there's very little in his biography of Lightfoot about the song. I can't find anything out online about how or why it was written. I did read that this was Gordon's mother's favorite song of all the ones that he wrote. This was the one that she loved the most. And he was playing it at a concert when she was very ill, or actually she might have just died. Okay, one of the two. And he said, this is my mother's favorite song. And the whole point of all this is that is the sum total of everything I could find out about the origins of the song. Do you have an angle on how the song got written or the circumstances? Obviously, it was before 1976, but any ideas about the sort of seed of the song?
No, I don't. That's a lovely nugget there about his mother's favorite song, that's for sure. If I wrote a song like that, I bet my mother would be pretty proud of it too. But I do wonder about one possible line or a kind of lineage for the song. And that's something I'm sure you've seen. It's a beautiful movie, short movie starring Frank Sinatra called The House I Live In. Have you ever seen that?
No, I've heard of it.
You can see it on YouTube, and it's a really wonderful sort of World War II era, post World War II era movie about accepting the stranger. Frank is on a break, having a smoke, taking 5 from the studio. All right, fellas, let's take 5. And he's out there in an alley, and he finds these kids who are chasing another kid because he's the wrong religion, and he pretty much schools them on what America is actually about. And he says something like, "Oh, you don't like his religion, huh? You must be one of those Nazis I've been hearing about." "What are you talking about? My dad's fighting the Nazis." "Really? Well, he may want to reconsider," Frank gives him
Oh
some,
my goodness. Wow. No, I had no idea.
And so it's this great statement of faith in the American dream of immigration, coming to this country and belonging, as Lincoln put it, something to the extent that, we're not here, we don't share anything by blood. We only have those electrical words in the Declaration of Independence that say all men are created equal. And when anybody coming from another country sees those lines in the Declaration, then they can claim this country as if they were the blood of the blood and flesh of the flesh of the men who wrote that declaration. That's what he says in a speech. And so I wonder if there's a connection. I wonder if Gordon Lightfoot, a Canadian, had ever seen this movie and used that phrasing to create this very beautiful song.
I'm going to have to watch the movie and then maybe listen to the song right after, just kind of expose myself to them back to back, because it seems like there's a common thread there. And I'm kind of a Sinatra fan. I'm not a fanatic about Old Blue Eyes, but I'm not a casual observer either.
You got a recognized game, right? I mean, we're Gordon Lightfoot guys, you and I, and I've never been crazy about Sinatra either, but he is the voice of a generation and he deserves his proper.
Well, let's take a look at the lyrics here, because I know that that's your bread and butter, and it's certainly something that Gordon was known for. Go first in the world, go forth with your fears. And not to conjure up yet another movie star of years gone by, John Wayne once said that courage is defined as feeling the fear and saddling up anyway. And so don't know if Lightfoot was a particular fan of John Wayne, but I do believe this idea that you need to take the initiative. The world is not going to hand you anything, even if your family hands you things that you need when you're growing up, as my family did and does, as your family did and does. Even if you're scared, you're going to have to take the initiative. Remember, a price must be paid, and you think about the effort that you put in, the work you're going to have to do. You're not going to be able to just lie there and say, "Beulah, peel me a grape," for your entire life. And it does acknowledge the inevitability of fears and of consequences. This is not a guy saying everything's going to be absolutely all roses as soon as you head out this door, because it's not. And in that sense, I think it's a wonderfully honest song.
Well, we all have to go with our fears, don't we? I mean, we've all got them. We carry that baggage with us. And when the point comes when we have to go out into the world, we're not going to leave that behind. We're going to take it with us, and we're going to have to find our way, even though that might be dragging us back some. And that line about, remember, a price must be paid. I mean, my 12-year-old self wouldn't have understood the real import of something like that, but there's a price to be paid for things. And when I look at it now that I'm in my 60s, and I can look back and see how that actually plays out in the course of somebody's life. There's a price to be paid for everything.
There's the throwaway line that there's no such thing as a free lunch, but this is much more meaningful than that, because it's not just talking about material expenses. You're listening to Carefree Highway Revisited. We'll be right back after a word from a podcast partner or two. Hey, I just wanted to take a second to tell you about my latest podcast discovery. Fire Breathing Kittens is an actual play one-shot podcast that plays various tabletop role-playing games with a season-long plot. Because there's a beginning and an end to each week's story, you can start at any episode. Yeah, you won't miss a thing. Every week has a different combination of 4 from the same rotating cast of people. Join Fire-Breathing Kittens as they solve detective mysteries, attempt comedic banter, and enjoy friendship. That's Fire-Breathing Kittens podcast. Check it out.
Hi, this is Audie Martello, the host of the Mostly Folk podcast, a 60-minute foray into the music we all love. You will hear newly released albums, classic folk, country, and bluegrass music, as well as some traditional music that may or may not be true to the genre. Sometimes irreverent, often opinionated, but always entertaining. You may even hear a radio magic trick every so often. as well as numerous interviews via Zoom and telephone with established as well as indie artists. Mostly Folk is available wherever you listen to podcasts, and always at mostlyfolk.org.
Be always too soon, be never too fast at the time when all bets must be laid. Now, when I first heard this, I thought Mr. Brandt is going to be able to pick this apart for me, because how can you be too soon but not too fast? What's he talking about?
Well, you got me there. You give me a little too much credit, but I'm not a gambling man, so I couldn't speak with any expertise on that. But maybe it's just a kind of thing about knowing your timing. Don't be too eager. Don't be so eager that you tip your hand, so to speak. Other than that, yeah, I would just think it's kind of like, there's a German expression that I'm going to drop now. 5 Minuten, which means 5 minutes before, is German punctuality. So, they don't have fast. I don't know. There's a subtle distinction that could mean something there.
There is a certain truth to that timing, I don't want to say timing is everything, because it's not, but there is a certain tension and balance with timing. In human interactions, time is a huge factor. Decision-making, time can be a huge factor. They say all bets must be laid. And I think about those being critical moments in life. Do you take this job or don't you? Do you pursue a relationship with this woman or don't you? Do you take this class in college or don't you? Do you have this interview or don't you? Not things like, do I wear the black socks or the blue socks? Really critical stuff. Beware of the darkness, be kind to your children. And in this case, this is a simplistic way of looking at darkness, but darkness does connote evil. It connotes confusion. It connotes lack of clarity. And so he's not saying that it's evil in the biblical sense, but he is saying that it is not someplace you want to go. Stay in the light, I guess, if you wanted to look at it another way. Be kind to your children. I don't think there's anything that we can say about that. Although it's ironic that Gord, by his own admission, there were times when he wasn't very kind to his children or to their mothers.
Well, he had to learn how to become a good person, as we all do. And he had some significant obstacles: drinking, being on the road, and presumably running around and things like that. I mean, he went through a couple marriages. How many? 2 or 3?
If I'm not mistaken, he had 3 marriages. He was married to his third wife when he died. He had a 4th relationship that produced at least 1 kid.
In that movie
called
If You Could Read My Mind, he talks about how bad a partner he was, and that he faltered both as a father and as a partner numerous times. And it's just an example of how we all have to work at it, because it sounds to me like toward the end of his life, he kind of figured it out. And so, yeah, I think that's a fair point that you make, really, that be kind to your children is a lovely line. It took a while before he sort of integrated into his own behavior.
And that's what makes me think that he may have been either consciously or unconsciously singing to one of his sons, because there's a lot in here that implies he's not singing to a girl. He's singing to a male, talking about the responsibilities of life. Miles.
Well, remember the woman who waits, right?
Remember the woman who waits. Now, that could mean a mother or a wife. He might be singing to Fred. He might be singing to Galen McGee. He might be singing to Eric. His youngest son, Miles, had not been born yet. And I don't know how old all of his kids were in 1975, 1976. I don't think any of them were at the point where they were going to be leaving the nest. But I do think that this was maybe even a song that I'm going to write this, I'm going to record it, and then I'm going to have it for when they turn 18 or 21 or whenever it is that they sort of fly the coop. And then we come back to this idea of the house, which you talked about a lot. The house you live in will never fall down if you pity the stranger who stands at your gate. Now, on first blush, it means be kind to the needy. That's certainly something that all religions teach us to do. Be welcoming to people who seem lost or need some sort of sustenance. Okay, again, kindness, empathy. And then you've talked about the metaphor of a house. And again, I want to give you props for extrapolating on that idea. It's not only talking about a physical house, because if you're unkind, it doesn't mean your house is going to fall down, but it does mean that your legacy, your family unit, those kinds of things, they will stand strong if you set the example.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. Yeah, it's don't bring trouble upon your own house. And one of the ways to not bring trouble on your own house is to welcome the stranger. That's the Beatitudes. That's, as far as religion is concerned, that's pretty basic. It's foundational.
And if not the Beatitudes, then certainly later on in the Gospel of Matthew, where, the sheep and the goats are being divided. I'm not going to go further down that road right now.
Sorry,
but
the goat.
When you're caught by the gale and you're full under sail, beware of the dangers below. Now, clearly, this is a metaphor. And of course, Gordon loved sailing, but I don't think he was talking about here's how you pilot a ship. But it's about the stresses of life. We can't control the gale. We can't control what is underneath us in the water. I think on the other, beware of the dangers below, there's a double entendre there about resorting to your baser instincts, okay, which tend to be sloth and greed and self-indulgence. And Gordon, again, has admitted that he did those kinds of things, although his poison of choice was alcohol. It wasn't cocaine like a lot of his contemporaries. But I think this is one of the wisest metaphors that he's ever used and one of the most apt metaphors he's ever used.
Well, even if he did do cocaine, I mean, he was with that Kathy Smith character, right? Oftentimes we find these wonderful songs are written by deeply flawed people, and yet they're still able to give these beautiful gifts to us, despite the flaws of their own character. And I just love that line about beware of the dangers below. It's just like beware of the darkness in the previous verse. There's always going to be something dangerous lurking nearby or beneath the surface. And we need to be aware of that as we proceed through our own journey.
There are some elements of that are going to be universal, and there are some that are going to be very, very personal, because whatever it lies below, those base instincts are probably things that are going to be different from every person. What hangs me up is not necessarily what's going to hang you up. And the song that you sing should not be too sad, and be sure not to sing it too slow. So what I thought of was your life's work. He's not saying to any of his sons, okay, hurry up and go into show business, because they were probably too young to think about that seriously in the first place. But the idea of the song, meaning your life's work, it should give satisfaction, and it should be something you can see the results of to some degree. It should be something positive, and it should be something you love. And we're going to talk in a minute about the impact of being a teacher and dealing with people. But I think he's saying that there has to be some inner satisfaction with the work that you're doing beyond just punching a clock, which is not to say that people who punch clocks are living lives of quiet desperation. We need people to do that kind of work. But he's saying, don't settle for that.
The song that you sing should not be too sad, and be sure not to sing it too slow. It could also just sort of be the way you approach life. Try to stay positive about it. It doesn't all have to be a minor key dirge, It shouldn't be like a medieval Gregorian chant. We can sing songs that bring us and others joy too, in whatever we do.
So maybe this is a kind of an element of don't take life too seriously.
Yeah. Anticipating the Indigo Girls by 20 years,
Or Paul Simon of a few years before, Here Is My Song for the Asking. And I have no idea if Simon and Lightfoot were friends at all, but that'd be interesting to investigate.
I'm sure they ran into each other at various Grammy Award ceremonies.
No doubt, or at various parties.
Yeah.
New York and Toronto are not that far apart. Be calm in the face of all common disgraces and know what they're doing it for. And I think about the willingness to have a reasonable conversation with anyone, no matter what you hear about them. And you and I are both educators, and my understanding is that this is your last act. You're going to be retiring at the end of this school year. The experience of dealing with kids or their parents is something I had to learn, that it wasn't a personal attack if they had a complaint. most of the time, or if they wanted to see me most of the time, it wasn't about anything personal. It was based on, is my kid okay? Is my kid getting the best experience that they possibly can? And it took me a while to realize that that was their agenda. It wasn't about destroying me. Is that a sentiment that you would agree with in your own teaching career?
Oh, absolutely. Nothing the kids do is personal, really, unless you've done something to really make them hate you. Fact is, a few years ago, I came up with the idea and I shared it on Facebook that I'm just the hold music of my students' lives. And the best I can hope to be is Beatles and Stones instead of Nickelback. And
I love that. Well, you could be Gordon Lightfoot too.
Or Gordon Lightfoot instead of who's the little tiptoe through the tulips guy?
Tiny Tim.
Yeah, instead of Tiny Tim or something like that. But then one of my college professors responded and said, and yet perhaps a few years down the line, your students might find themselves singing your tune, which I thought was a beautiful response. Because I was just starting with this humility that teaching imposes on you. You're going to go in with grand expectations about what you're going to achieve. And then you discover that things you achieve are going to be a lot more subtle and not particularly earth-shattering. And yet, maybe further on down the line, put it this way, maybe the seeds that you planted will sprout and blossom. I feel that way very much so about teaching. As far as the common disgraces are concerned, whether it's teaching or in life, I just embarrass myself all the time. I just slip and fall on some banana peel, whether figurative or not, and everybody's going to laugh. And they're going to laugh because it's funny. And sometimes you're the hammer and sometimes you're the nail. And you just got to be okay with that. So be calm in the face of all common disgraces and know what they're doing it for. It's no big.
And again, it comes back to don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's only life after all.
the people who run Indigo Girls podcasts are going to be jumping down my throat in a minute.
Yeah, they have to go another podcast.
That wraps up the first part of this episode of Carefree Highway Revisited. The second part of this discussion will be released very soon. I hope you enjoyed this conversation so far and that you listen to the second part when it comes out. See you next time.